In the year 2026, we have successfully deleted boredom from the human experience. We are the most stimulated generation to ever walk the earth. We have an answer for every question, just a voice command away. But as our horizontal connection to the world reaches its peak, our vertical connection often feels like a broken line. Have you ever been there? You've reached the end of your strength. You've followed the rules, you've kept the faith, and you've prayed the prayers. But the answer you're looking for isn't a yes or a no, it's a void. It's the sound of nothing. In theology, they call it the hiddenness of God. In our daily lives, we call it agony. We live in a culture of instant gratification, where a delay is seen as a malfunction. We assume that if God is silent, he is either angry, indifferent, or simply not there. But what if the silence is actually a language? What if God's quietness isn't a wall, but a bridge to a version of you that doesn't exist yet? Today, we aren't just asking, why is he silent? We are asking, what is he building in the dark? Let's go back 3,700 years to a man named Joseph. Joseph was a teenager of destiny. He had dreams of stars bowing to him, but dreams have a price. He was sold by his brothers, trafficked into Egypt, and eventually framed for a crime he never committed. For 13 long years, Joseph lived in a prophetic silence. Think about the psychological toll. Every morning for over 4,000 days, Joseph woke up in a prison. He prayed to the God of his father Jacob, but the stone walls didn't whisper back. There was no burning bush in that dungeon. There was no pillar of cloud. Why did God wait? Why let the baker and the cupbearer leave while Joseph rotted for 2 more years? Because Joseph was being prepared to hold the economy of the world in his hands. If God had spoken to him in the pit, Joseph would have relied on the promise. God wanted him to rely on the promiser. Silence is the crucible of character. It's where your ego goes to die so your calling can be born. If you are in a prison of silence today, God isn't ignoring you, he is aging you, like a fine wine or a rare violin, preparing you for a stage you can't even see yet. Then there's David, anointed to be king as a boy, yet forced to live like a fugitive for a decade. He lived in the caves of Adullam and En-Gedi. Saul had the palace, the army, and the visible blessing. David had the rocks, the scorpions, and the silence. In those caves, David felt the crushing weight of God's quietness. He wrote in Psalm 13, "How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me?" This wasn't a Sunday school song. This was a scream into the dark. But look closer. It was in that silence that David's greatest strength was forged. He learned that God is not just the God of the mountaintop, he is the God of the shadows. In the palace, you learn about God's power. In the cave, you learn about his presence. The silence of the cave forced David to stop trusting in his own skill with a sling and start trusting in the shepherd of his soul. If your life feels like a hidden cave right now, remember, David entered the cave as a fugitive, but he left as a king. The silence was the coronation ceremony that no one else could see. One of the most terrifying periods in the Bible is the gap between the Old and New Testaments, 400 years. From the last words of Malachi to the first cry of John the Baptist, there was not a single recorded prophecy. For 4 centuries, God's people felt abandoned. They saw empires rise and fall, they saw their temple desecrated, and they asked, "Has God forgotten his covenant?" But while the prophets were silent, God's hands were moving history like a grand architect. He was allowing the Greeks to unify the world's language so the gospel could be understood by all. He was allowing the Romans to build a global road system so the message could travel to the ends of the earth. He was letting the world get dark enough so that the light of the world would be unmistakable. Your period of silence is often a period of global realignment in your life. God is moving people you haven't met yet, closing doors that would have destroyed you later, and building roads that your feet will walk on in 10 years. Just because you don't hear the hammer doesn't mean the temple isn't being built. We cannot talk about silence without talking about Job. Job lost everything, his wealth, his children, his health, and for 37 chapters, he endured the worst kind of silence, the silence of an accused man. His friends told him he was a sinner. His heart told him he was innocent. He pleaded for a day in court. He wanted God to show up and explain the why. But God didn't explain. When God finally spoke in chapter 38, he didn't mention Job's suffering at all. He spoke about the stars, the foundations of the earth, and the leviathans of the deep. Why? Because God was showing Job that his ways are infinitely larger than our why. Silence is the only place where we can learn to trust God's heart when we cannot trace his hand. It purifies our faith. It takes us from a contractual relationship where we obey to get blessings to a covenant relationship where we love him simply because he is God. The silence didn't break Job, it diamond-plattered him. He came out with a double portion, but more importantly, he came out with a vision of God that no one else on earth had. The greatest silence in the history of the universe happened on a Saturday. Jesus, the Word of life, was dead. The mouth that spoke the worlds into existence was silenced behind a cold stone. For the disciples, it was the end. The silence was the proof that they had lost. But Holy Saturday is the most active day in the spiritual realm. While the world saw a corpse, the grave saw a conqueror. In the silence of that tomb, the chains of death were being snapped. The debt of humanity was being settled. The greatest victory was being won in the one place where everyone thought God had failed. If you are in a Saturday, that middle ground between the promise and the resurrection, do not be afraid. The silence of the tomb is not the end of the story. It is the breath God takes before he shouts, "It is finished." Your miracle doesn't need God to speak. It just needs God to be there. And he is. God doesn't shout because he is far away. He whispers because he is close. He uses silence to make you lean in. If you find yourself in a season of quietness, don't try to fill it with noise. Don't try to force a door open that he has closed. Instead, do what the seed does in the ground. Grow deep. Do what David did in the cave. Write your song. Do what Jesus did in the tomb. Wait for the Father's timing. The silence of God is a compliment to your faith. It means he trusts you enough to stay even when you can't hear him. The dawn is coming. The stone will roll, and you will find that in every second of silence, he was closer to you than your own breath.